Well, I too want to thank the church, Pastor Cody, Pastor Terry, and Chuck, especially. When I do a presentation or talk to people, I figure they're going to see it exactly how I see it, and they're going to run, and I'm going to light a fire under them. But it doesn't always happen. So when Chuck first heard me, it was probably 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and then he came down and heard me in Fresno, and he's been up to San Francisco, and he's been all over. So it's really kind of a joy. It's kind of like discipleship when you talk to somebody and they get what you're trying to share, and that it's truly happening in our schools. And I am encouraged to see so many of you here tonight to learn about the comprehensive sexuality education agenda that the state of California has mandated on both public and charter schools. Now, you may be like so many others that aren't aware of the laws or the framework, but by the end of the evening, you will know what your children and grandchildren could potentially, and I will say potentially, be exposed to at school. I cover a lot of information, so feel free to take notes. You can take pictures of the slides. Most of the information is cited. That way you can look it up and make sure that I have not given you incorrect information. I will say if there's a page number, sometimes on your computer, if the print is different, the page number might be off a little bit, but you will have the general area where to find the information. I believe this is a spiritual battle. I know people tend to say that, but we are in the end times. This is nothing different than Sodom and Gomorrah, so it shouldn't surprise anybody. I want you to be encouraged, even though the information tonight may be overwhelming, that God is still in control and He is still on the throne. And I truly have to tell myself that quite often because this information can be very overwhelming. I will use some explicit language, and I will have some explicit photos, but it's what our children, again, have the potential of being exposed to, so I want you to know what is going on. Now, it does appear that school districts are doing their best to maneuver around and through comprehensive sexuality education, and I will try to refer to it as CSE. It's just easier to say. But they are not properly informing parents. Brad Dacus is an attorney and the president of Pacific Justice Institute out of Sacramento. And he said parents have a right and a responsibility to send out letters with explicit information for parents. And he said, and those letters need to include an opt-out form, and they also need to be followed up with phone calls. This needs to be addressed with every school district in the state of California, and that is a really good place for everyone here to start, to attend a school board meeting and say, you need to be informing our parents. Chuck shared quite a bit, but I am passionate about education, and although I'm not an expert, I consider myself well-studied. I have poured myself into education since 2013, as Chuck said, when the Common Core state standards were first rolled out. Besides working for Clovis Unified, I ran for the school board in 2016. I lost to a 25-year incumbent, but it was for the best, because school board members must abide by state and federal mandates. And I'm sure many of you know about the whole bathroom issue a couple years ago, and now with this, I'd have quit by now. So it really was, a lot of money was spent, but it was for the best, and I do love tutoring. I want to point out two things with US PI. We have two main goals. Number one is to close the Federal Department of Education. It is unconstitutional, and to get rid of all their federal education mandates. Secondly, we want to restore the control of education to local communities and to parents, which is where it was designed in the first place. Now, I don't know how many of you know, but California students are not faring so well in academic excellence. It depends on where you look on the website, but I would say we average about 40th. That's not good. And I heard Victor Davis Hanson, I think it was a month ago, at the Lincoln-Reagan dinner, and he said that Forbes actually has ranked our high school seniors at 49th. But instead of focusing on why our children are not proficient in reading, writing, and arithmetic, California has mandated a new set of standards and has begun educating children as young as kindergarten in sexual orientation and gender identity, and an acronym is SOGI. And although most of you haven't seen it, as I said before, the potential is there that your children could be exposed to it. Now, let's take a look at where CSE, a rights-based approach to sex education, began. Comprehensive Sexuality began as a United Nations-sponsored program developed in collaboration with Planned Parenthood, the #1 abortion provider in the world. Advocates for Youth is an organization that encourages young people to fight for sexual rights, sexual health, and sexual justice. When I went to their website, it's a nice picture of this group of young people, and it says, "Our bodies, our lives, our movement." And lastly, SECUS. SECUS is the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States. They are pro-abortion, pro-homosexuality, pro-pornography, and pro-masturbation. This right here is where my greatest concerns lie. SECUS was founded by Mary Calderon. She was a former medical provider with Planned Parenthood from 1953 to 1964, which was the year that SECUS was launched from the Kinsey Institute. The objective was to teach Kinsey ideology. With a show of hands, how many know about Alfred Kinsey and Table 34? There are a few. Kinsey's ideology, and this is the hardest part for me to share, Kinsey's ideology has shaped how and when sex education is taught in the U.S. Kinsey believed that children were sexual from birth and had the right to sexual pleasure at all ages. To prove this, he allowed the sexual abuse of more than 300 children from ages 2 months to 15 years in order to record data that he published in what many of us know as the Kinsey Report. Kinsey's ideology is supported by Planned Parenthood, Advocates for Youth, and SECUS, the 3 organizations that collaborated to develop CSE. And the Kinsey Institute still exists on the campus of Indiana University. After sex education was introduced into our schools in 1964, pregnancies to unwed girls 15 and under and children and sexually transmitted diseases in children ages 10 to 14 began to increase immediately. This was no accident. Sex education was never designed to decrease teen pregnancy and STDs, but rather prepare children for sex. UNESCO's 2009 International Guidelines on Sexuality maintain that children have a right to receive instruction in sexual pleasure, masturbation, and homosexuality. In early 2019, UNESCO released its comprehensive sexuality education standards for use in every school, in every country all over the world, beginning in kindergarten. So it's not just happening here in California, it is happening all over the world. Petit Moonerborn, he is the first United Nations expert on sexual orientation and gender identity. And this is one of his quotes. Children's attitudes on these issues are to be measured and tracked, with the standards including attitudinal outcomes. It should permeate the entire curriculum from the beginning of formal schooling. When it comes to immersing children in LGBT ideology, the younger, the better. Now, I want you to realize that your children's attitudes or your grandchildren's attitudes about gender and sexual orientation are being tracked when they answer questions at school on their computers. I have a friend whose daughter is a sophomore at Sierra High School, again, thinking she lives in this tiny community, that nothing's going to happen. And of course, everyone I know knows where I stand on this. And so her children have been warned and educated as they can get up and walk out of class. And so one day I'm tutoring and this phone call just keeps coming through, and I thought I better answer it. She said, "Sandy, she is sitting in class. She has taken a picture of her assignment, and the assignment came from Rainbow Connections. And there's all these questions on gender, and they're gradually getting a little bit deeper, finally saying, when someone sees you, what gender do you think they think you are?" And so I told her, send a text back to her and tell her, don't answer it, because they are tracking and monitoring, because they want to indoctrinate us to think a certain way. Although I have my share of concerns with public education in general, and I do want to point out, education in general is, there is a good explanation for everything that's going on in this magazine. I do not have copies now, but I have 50 copies coming. If you're interested, I can actually email you the PDF of this. Sorry, that's a little commercial there. Nothing has alarmed me as much as Senate Bill 48, the Fair Education Act, AB 329, the California Healthy Youth Act, and the Health Education Framework. Each is very different, yet they are working together to promote a progressive ideology in our classrooms, thus the war on our children. They have caused a great deal of confusion, and I will do my best to clarify the difference tonight. We will start with Senate Bill 48 that was passed by the California legislature in 2011, and it became law on January 1st, 2012. The Fair Education Act requires schools to include the historical contributions of a wide variety of individuals, including LGBT figures. The law also requires that all instructional materials be free from discrimination and accurately portray the diversity of our society. Now, unfortunately, many school districts are choosing to approve textbooks and curriculum that go far beyond what this law mandates, recognizing people based on just their gender identity or their involvement with LGBT issues. As a result of SB 48, the state of California has begun to use LGBT-inclusive social studies textbooks. Many of us are familiar with Pearson Publishing. They are a very large education publisher. This is what is called My World Interactive. First graders learn that Gavin Newsom said that people could marry whom they choose. Some marriages he performed were not between a man and a woman. This is first grade. Second graders learned that Jose Julio Soria was a leader of gay rights help groups, that he often dressed in women's clothing and inspired other gay leaders to run for office. Now, this is a gay rights timeline for second graders. Although the information included concerns me, Harvey Milk, Jerry Studs, the year that they had a right to same-sex marriage, etc. How many second graders do you think know the timeline of California in general? They don't. But now they're going to know this. Harvey Milk. This is an excerpt from the third grade My World Interactive, and I'm only going to read what's in red. Gay men are attracted to other men. Lesbians are women who are attracted to other women. And bisexual are those attracted to both men and women. Now, in case you don't know Harvey Milk's background, 2 biographies about him reveal that he lied for years about his military service, and he was a sexual predator of young boys that were living on the streets, boys that had drug problems. Milk also appears in other textbooks, second graders, fifth graders. This is not someone that our children need to be learning about, and this goes far beyond the mandates of the law. I know that at Clovis High School, they actually handed out milkshakes on May 22nd this year to celebrate Harvey Milk Day. Now, fourth graders, learned that Sally Ride was the first American lesbian astronaut. George Takei, who played Sulu in Star Trek, is a gay rights activist. Chaz Bono is a transgender. I don't know what else that she or he has done. And then we have Charlie Parkhurst, which is actually a very interesting story. Charlie was a stagecoach driver in the early 1800s, a stagecoach driver for 30 years. And when Charlie died, the coroner went in and said, oh my, found out that Charlie was born Charlotte. And so I believe the writers are taking a lot of liberty here, and they are teaching children that she was a possible transgender. Well, in the 1800s, you could not be a stagecoach driver, but I guess she was great with a gun, great with a lasso, very skilled. What if she just wanted to be one, and so she disguised herself? But they're taking the liberty here to teach our children that. Now, besides Sally Ride, I fail to see the historical contribution of those that I have mentioned. That includes the brief overview of Senate Bill 48, the Fair Education Act. Next, we have Assembly Bill 329, the California Healthy Youth Act, or what we now know as Comprehensive Sexuality Education. It was passed in 2015 and became law on January 1st of 2016. It requires that schools teach CSE twice, 10 hours each, once in junior high and once in high school, but it can be taught on a more frequent basis. Now, this is an interesting bit of news. Assembly member Shirley Weber is a Democrat from San Diego, and she authored AB 329 as a result of a lawsuit against Clovis Unified School District in 2012 for providing abstinence only until marriage curricula without also providing accurate information about contraception. They did provide accurate information, but the two families that sued didn't feel like it was enough, so kudos to Clovis Unified. These are the the organizations that are in support of the California Healthy Youth Act. The California Teachers Association, the California School Boards Association, the California Parent Teachers Association, the PTA. It is a political organization, if you did not know that. And Planned Parenthood, our #1 abortion provider in the world, the ACLU, California Latinos for Reproductive Justice, Forward Together, and Equality California. Now, I assure you that most teachers have no idea that their union dues have supported the development and the implementation of CSE. I think we all know that teachers are underpaid, but instead of increasing their salaries, our tax dollars have been funneled right here for the last 3.5 years. If I was a teacher and that's where I found out my dues were going, I would be angry. Because of AB 329, California is one of the first states to address LGBT issues as part of their sex education program. The California Healthy Youth Act mandates that sexual health education must include all genders and sexual orientations, that instruction affirmatively recognize different sexual orientations and be inclusive of same-sex relationships when providing examples of couples or relationships. It must also teach about gender, gender expression, gender identity, and explore the harms of a negative gender stereotypes. So I personally believe that a biological boy is a boy and a biological girl is a girl, and that is considered a negative gender stereotype. Now, one of the first questions I'm asked, can I opt my children out of this? Education Code 51938 says that a parent or a guardian has the right to excuse their child from all or part of CSE, HIV prevention education, and assessments related to that education through a passive opt-out process. In order to excuse a child, the parent or guardian must state their request in writing to the school district. Some parents have said, well, the teacher said I only needed to give it to them. Some principals have said, no, just turn it into me. If it was me, I would do all three. I would make sure the school district, the principal, and the teacher had a copy. Now, Education Code 51932 says that a parent or guardian cannot opt out of instruction, materials, presentations, or programs that discuss gender, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, and do not discuss human reproductive organs and their functions. These topics that you see listed in red are woven throughout all the curricula and can show up at any time, in any class, in any grade, without parental notification. Now, how many have heard about the Rockland Charter Academy? Nobody. All right. This is a perfect example. In this instance, a teacher read 2 books about gender identity to her kindergarten class on the last day of school in June of 2017. She read The Red Crayon, which is about a blue crayon mistakenly labeled red. No matter how hard he tries, he can't be red. And I Am Jazz, which is an autobiographical children's picture book about a transgender girl. It is a true story. Now, after the teacher read these books, little boy got up, told his classmates that I am a girl, I am trapped in a boy's body. He went to the restroom, and in kindergarten, the restroom's in there. Came back out dressed as a girl, told his classmates what he now wanted to be called. Needless to say, the children were very upset at what had just unfolded before their eyes. But the parents of those children learned about it after the fact and were obviously angry. They had a fundamental right to be made aware of the material before it was read to their but the law does not require it. The charter lost 90 students, but what I was disturbed with is that same teacher was named Charter School Teacher of the Year in 2018. Let's continue on with what the law mandates. It mandates that we must provide pupils with the knowledge and skills necessary to protect their sexual and reproductive health from HIV and sexually transmitted infections and from unintended pregnancy. We are to provide pupils with the knowledge and skills about gender and sexual orientation. I first want you to notice the word infection. They used to be called sexually transmitted diseases because diseases are dangerous. Diseases cannot usually be cured and often lead to death. Infections don't sound as bad anymore. So the state, without parental input, they had no parental input, has decided what knowledge and skills are appropriate and what is a healthy attitude concerning these. So who do you think is going to provide this information to our pupils? It will most likely be Planned Parenthood, SECUS, and an organization called GLISTEN, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network that creates LGBT inclusive schools. Education Code 51933, we see much of the same objectives here. The instruction and material shall affirmatively recognize people that have different sexual orientations. Discussions shall be inclusive of same-sex relationships. Well, affirm means to give something a big yes, to confirm that something is true. There are teachers all over the state struggling with this. They know that if they don't teach it, they could lose their jobs, and if they do teach it, it goes against their morals and their standards. Instruction and materials shall teach pupils about gender, gender expression, gender identity, and explore the harm of negative gender stereotypes, which I already explained earlier. And then under I, instruction and materials may not teach or promote religious doctrine. And what they mean by that is they further explain that religion justifies abuse because it insists on rigid gender roles. Now, Assembly Bill 493 is a recent bill that passed the California State Assembly with an alarming vote of 61-0. This is a mandatory training bill for public and charter school teachers in grades 7 to 12. Now, teachers are already receiving sensitivity training. They're learning how to use preferred pronouns, stop referring to students by their biological genders as boy and girls, and to teach sexual orientation and various gender identities. But Brad Dacus, who I mentioned earlier, the attorney with Pacific Justice, has clearly stated that the law says that beginning in 2021, teachers will be tracked and monitored to ensure that they positively promote an LGBTQ lifestyle on our youth. Education Code 51934, the law requires school districts to ensure that all pupils in grades 7 to 12 inclusive receive CSE and HIV prevention education, and that a school district that elects to offer CSE or HIV prevention education earlier than grade 7 may provide age-appropriate and medically accurate information on any of the general topics. There is some good news. There are schools teaching CSE in elementary school. There is a woman by the name of Denise Persha. She's from the Bay Area, and her 5th grader was exposed to CSE. He came home from school, and she could tell something was very wrong. And she finally said, "Son, what happened?" And he said, "Well, Mama, today we had to color some pictures." And she said, "Well, what did you have to color?" This is 5th grade, a 5th grade boy. "Mama, we had to color a vagina. And we had to learn about the clitoris, which is a sensitive part, and the anus," and he went on and on. So she wrote this bill. She couldn't even find a representative in her area that would author it. So she found Mike Morrell, who's actually from the Riverside area, and I met him a few months ago. He is an amazing man. So he has authored this bill. He did table it and is going to reintroduce it in January. It would amend the California Healthy Youth Act. He does have a petition, and that's one of the things I want to encourage you, and I'll mention it again later. There is a petition that I would love to have you sign. He's got about 45,000 signatures, but in order to reintroduce it in January, that number needs to grow. This bill would require an active opt-in to CSE and HIV prevention education courses rather than a passive opt-out. So many of you have probably gotten opt-outs for other things. That means your son or daughter brings an opt-out form. If you sign it and he forgets to turn it in, he has to participate in the course, or if you don't send the paper back. But if an active opt-in is issued and that teacher doesn't get it back and signed, your child cannot participate. So this is really huge. It would also require elementary age CSE curriculum, including gender issues and HIV prevention courses, to be available to parents online. Most of the curriculum you cannot find online at your school district. And it would close a loophole in the law and mandate that all instruction must be both medically accurate and age appropriate. That last law I showed you that said maybe, it must be age appropriate. Education Code 51936. School districts may contract with outside consultants or guest speakers, and they must all have expertise in CSE and HIV prevention education. You need to ask your school districts who they are going to contract with as consultants and guest speakers. If it's Planned Parenthood, you need to know their motives. How many people saw the movie Unplanned? It was about Abby Johnson. Good. There was a good number of you. Abby Johnson, that is her story about owning an abortion clinic. So much of this it did come from exactly what she said. Planned Parenthood wants to develop a relationship with your children beginning in kindergarten, so that when your children start to go through puberty and they say, "Oh, I just can't, I want to talk to my parents about this," they're going to say, No, you can't talk to them, but you can talk to me because I've known you since you were 5. Then when those girls are about 11, 12, and 13, they want to get them on a birth control method that they know has a high failure rate. Hopefully, They will get a girl into their abortion clinics before they graduate high school. Planned Parenthood has quotas, and their employees are trained to share specific talking points to convince scared girls to have abortions, including those with religious convictions. Now, these are the 6 curriculum that currently align with the California Healthy Youth Act. The first one is FLASH, which I have not found a school district that uses FLASH. It was developed up in the Seattle area. Positive Prevention Plus is used by many school districts in the Valley and is considered conservative only when compared to the other 5. The bottom one, Rights, Respect, and Responsibility. When I went to the website, it warned me that it had no rating. Making Proud Choices is a product of Planned Parenthood. Be Real, Be Ready is a product, is developed by San Francisco Unified School District. And Teen Talk is specifically for 7th and 8th graders, although the other curriculums are being used for junior high also. So I'm going to show you 1 or 2 slides for each of these. This is from Positive Prevention Plus, and you will see the different sexual behaviors that our children are being taught. And I want to point out here, I have a dear friend that I just love very much. She's very supportive. She's a very strong Christian. We had dinner one night, and she said, well, when I put up this slide, I just kind of put it up and I don't explain deeper. And I said, you what? This is my Christian friend. So she said she doesn't go into detail, but you have to be careful. Even if your kids have Christian teachers, many of them are still teaching this. Now, even if this isn't a slide that's being used, our children have these websites that are made available to them through Positive Prevention Plus. These websites include topics about clitoral pleasure, what guys like, talking to friends to find out if they think masturbation is taboo, anal sex myths and facts, and male versus female pleasure. This is from Be Real, Be Ready, and I don't know if you can see that in the middle. It says fun facts. And then underneath where it's been underlined, it says, since the anus is not part of the reproductive system, if someone chooses to have anal sex without a condom or protection, pregnancies would not be possible. So students are being taught that anal sex, and even though this does not mention oral sex, is a way to avoid an unwanted pregnancy. Anal sex is the highest risk of all sexual behaviors. Condoms are not approved for anal sex because they are not strong enough. The HIV virus can penetrate a condom easier than a sperm. Even with 100% perfect use, a condom is only effective 70% of the time. Now, this is Making Proud Choices from Planned Parenthood, and I want to know what happened to biology, abstinence, and protection. This goes far beyond. It says at the top, on the top left, how to make condoms fun and pleasurable. By the way, these lessons are for 12 to 14-year-olds. Use condoms as a method of foreplay. Think up a sexual fantasy. Act sexy or sensual. Tease each other sexually while putting on the condom. Have fun putting one on your partner. Feel more relaxed and you can really enjoy yourself, and condoms make erections last longer. This is not about teaching children about responsible choices. It is about sexualizing them at an early age through lessons that encourage high-risk sexual behaviors. This is from Rights, Respect, and Responsibility. And I don't know how many of you are homeschoolers or you go through a charter school, but Inspire has actually adopted Rights, Respect, Responsibility as what they're going to use, the curriculum they're going to use. I actually get paid by several of my clients through this, and I'm going to have to, I just can't anymore. So if they can't afford me, then They're going to have to go because I can't do this. I can't be associated. I didn't know what a dental dam was. I've learned a lot in my research. Well, a dental dam is for oral sex. It is made out of latex and used as a barrier between a person's mouth, and I'll make it easy, and their partner's genitals, but your students will hear the exact places where these are to be used. Now, in the same lessons, if students don't have access to a dental dam, they are taught how to make one from a condom or a latex glove. And then the last one, as far as the curriculum, is Teen Talk. Remember, this is junior high. The objective is to define oral, vaginal, and anal sex. They are also to define abstinence, which obviously that's a good thing, and discuss the possible risks associated with each type of sex. Now, that concludes what the California Healthy Youth Act mandates. That is the law. Lastly, we have the California Health Framework. Now, frameworks are written for all subjects. They are not curricula, and school districts are not required to use the recommended materials. However, frameworks are what are currently driving the writing of curriculum and textbooks. School districts do have the ability to choose what is appropriate for their population, but even if a school district chooses to write their own curriculum, they have to abide by the law. And if a teacher chooses to implement any portion of this framework, they are also protected by the law. I attended this March rally at the state capitol. Parents opposed the framework, and there were thousands that were at the state capitol. I think they had 3 or 4 rallies that were organized. And I was one of 110 people after this March rally that spoke before what is called now the Instructional Quality Commission. They write the frameworks, and they wrote this framework. We pleaded, each one of us pleaded with them to stop this framework in its tracks. At the conclusion of our testimonies, they said, "Thank you so much, but we're moving forward." So it was really clear that we knew that the outcome was already predetermined. Despite months of continued opposition, the California State Board of Education approved this framework on May 8th of this year. Because of continued complaints, they did agree to remove several recommended books. This book presents high school students with a detailed how-to sex manual that includes instruction on sex for all sexual orientations, bondage, domination, sadomasochism, body fluid, blood play, and fisting. Much of what I did not know was. Now, they don't just mention these activities, they describe how to perform each one. The Instructional Quality Commission is making curriculum decisions like this for your children. I want you to just try to understand their mindset. They read this book and they approved it. In fact, at one point, they recommended it as a school-wide read. This book has been removed from that recommended list, but as I said, this book can still be used as a resource. I purchased this book. It is vile, and it is unacceptable for anyone at any age. Anyone. Now, this framework consists of 9 chapters and just over 1,000 pages. I will cover briefly chapters 3, 4, 5, and 6, which cover transitional kindergarten through 12th grade. Now, this is Stephanie Gregson. She was the former director of the curriculum frameworks. She was there when I spoke that day before the Instructional Quality Commission. And she is quoted as saying, "I think that people hear the word transgender or gender identity and guidance for kindergarten through grade 3, and they think the worst. It's really about a civil rights issue." Well, the American College of Pediatricians 2018 report contradicts Dr. Gregson's statement. They believe that CSE goes far beyond sex education and is a dangerous assault on the health and innocence of children. Dr. Miriam Grossman said, "I'm worried about the systematic indoctrination taking place in classes all over the world." You heard that earlier tonight. Yes, these are strong words, but the situation is ominous and warns them. Small children do not have the ability to understand the idea of transgenderism, that a person can feel trapped in the wrong body. Now let's take a look at what the IQC and the California State Board of Education deem appropriate for our children. TK through third grade, when providing instruction on sexual reproductive organs, teachers can introduce the concept that gender does not always match the sexual and reproductive organs described. The actual anatomical name for organs is utilized. Well, you just heard what the American College of Pediatricians said, and common sense tells you that this is going to confuse children. Can you imagine if you're talking to a 4 to 8-year-old talking about reproductive organs? That's just going to fly right over their head. And I am one of those, I am in favor of using correct anatomical names. I am. I waited till my boys were 2 and 3, and then when I tried to tell them, they were like, "That is yucky, Mom, that is yucky." But the problem is that doesn't need to be taught in school. And children this age are going to be taught vulva, vagina, clitoris, anus, testicles, and penis. And it's important to note that boys and girls will not be separated. This is partnering with your community. Members of the community who defy traditional stereotypes could be invited as guest speakers, including individuals of all gender, including people who are transgender, should be included. Drag queens are suggested as those that should be invited to a school. Now this is chapter 4, so we're talking 4th through 6th grade. Instruction must affirm diverse sexual orientations and include examples of same-sex relationships. CSE instruction must also include gender, gender expression, gender identity, and the harmful outcomes that occur from a negative gender stereotype. Every student should be treated equally and with loving dignity, but the state does not have the right to mandate that instruction must affirm someone based on their sexual orientation or their gender identity. Teachers are to explain that masturbation is safe and not mentally or physically harmful. It is Planned Parenthood, CSE, and advocates for youth who have determined that masturbation is not physically or mentally harmful. Ask anyone that has struggled with masturbation and pornography, and they will tell you just how difficult it is. Teachers can discuss gender roles, and gender expression, as puberty can be a difficult time for all students. Educators should create an environment that is inclusive and challenge binary concepts about gender. Children are so impressionable, and teachers are being told to challenge the concept that gender is not limited to male and female. Are students this age going to question a teacher that challenges their concept of gender? Will teachers also tell these same students that biology doesn't support this? I'd be reminded these are 9 to 11-year-olds, and the instruction, again, is in mixed company. We all remember the gingerbread man, right? Well, now he's called the genderbread person. We will talk about gender identity with these children, 9 to 11-year-olds, gender expression, biological sex, expression, you name it. And under the title, the genderbread person, you cannot see it, but this is what it says. Gender is one of those things everyone thinks they understand, but most people don't. Like Inception, gender isn't binary. It's not either or. In many cases, it's both. and a little bit of this and a dash of that. This tasty little guide is meant to be an appetizer for gender understanding. It's okay if you're hungry for more. In fact, that's the idea. This is for 7th and 8th graders. Activities listing examples of relationship behaviors may include oral sex, anal sex, sexual intercourse, and getting tested for STIs and HIV together. This could open up the door to risky behaviors and steal the innocence of so many. And what they aren't teaching these kids, and what I didn't know, is that sexual intercourse between minors is illegal and subject to misdemeanor and felony charges and or imprisonment, along with what we know could be lifelong consequences. And at the very bottom, you will see where I have listed the California penal codes that support the illegal activity. Condom and dental dam demonstrations can be provided with students individually practicing the step-by-step process on a penis model or on their fingers. There's one condom relay race game where the teacher brings in 2 anatomically erect penises, puts one on one side, one on the other. They then give the instructions of how to properly put on a condom and how to properly take it off. When the race starts, just like any race we've always done in school, the girls, boys run up, put it on out loud, describing the steps, then they take it off. If they get one of those steps incorrectly, they must start again. Then they turn around, they slap the next person's hand and come up. This is, remember, mixed company. 9th through 12th graders, the usage of LGBTQ+ throughout this document is intended to represent an inclusive and ever-changing spectrum and understanding of ideas. This means that genders are infinite, that they're always changing, and there's no limit to them. And the 11th graders are suggested, Alfred Kinsey is listed as a person of interest for them to study. And I already explained about Alfred Kinsey. Education Code Section 48205 requires school officials to excuse students from school to attend confidential medical appointments. The school cannot require the student have parent or guardian consent in order to attend the appointment and cannot notify parents or guardians. Confidential appointments are appointments to receive services that minors can obtain on their own under the state or federal law. Now, your children and your grandchildren can't even go to the nurse's office to get an aspirin. But girls can leave campus during school hours without parental notification, come back to school at 2 o'clock and slip out the door when that bell rings at 2:30 or 3:30 without anyone saying a thing. Parents, by law, are considered to have full responsibility for children under the age of 18, but a minor of any age seeking an abortion may agree to the procedure without parents being informed or giving consent. Do you know you have to give consent for a child to go on a field trip, to work on a computer at school, to participate in sports? But your daughters can get an abortion without you knowing it. And for those of you that don't already know, Fresno County now has an unmarked white van that picks up girls at the school. Those vans, what happens if that van gets into an accident? What happens if they haven't properly vetted that driver and he's involved with human trafficking? This is a very, very dangerous area. The ACLU is now instructing school staff on how to enforce this law. This is so wrong, and your tax dollars are paying for this. I am so hoping that by Trump defunding Planned Parenthood, that this will make a huge impact. This sums up what the state has determined is age appropriate for our children. I think it's clear that the government is using our schools to sexualize, pervert, and confuse our children. This isn't about heterosexuality. It is not about homosexuality. It is about sexualizing our children. We need to let kids be kids. What are you willing to do to protect your children? I absolutely love this picture. I think all of us in here would absolutely take an arrow. We would take a bullet for our children. Some of you here may be okay with this, and I need to respect that. But there are those of you that are not okay with this, and I believe together we can stop this. I wouldn't be here if I didn't think we could make a difference. I do believe it's going to be pulling your kids out of school at least for a time, like a sit-out, until it makes a difference. Because when your kids aren't, or your grandchildren are not in their seat, the school does not get funding. It's going to have to happen until those withdrawn tax dollars affect school funding enough that our politicians finally take action. If that doesn't work, I truly believe parents are going to have to pull their kids out of school altogether. If we all, and I mean all of us, stand up to insidious state and federal mandates, I truly believe that we can stop this decline of American education. If you don't stand up for your children and your grandchildren, who will? There are a few things I would like to point out. If you're on Facebook, there are 3 excellent groups. Informed Parents of California, Informed Parents of Fresno County, and Let Parents Decide Fresno. They are constantly giving examples of what's happening truly in every school district in California. Things are happening on a daily basis, and parents need to know that. Communicate with your teachers and school administrators. Teachers need your support now more than ever. Attend school board meetings. That's where you need to go and say, that's where those letters need to be sent out. You need to know specifically what your school is doing. You need to review all the district's CSE curriculum, not just like what I showed you. Every video, every additional handout, it's important that you know. Review all the books that your children are reading, especially those that come home from the school library. The ACLU goes into school libraries to make sure they are compliant. Sign the petition that I mentioned earlier to support SB 673. There is also a petition that I just signed today to stop the Kinsey Institute. Attend organized rallies and sit-outs in opposition to CSE, and educate your children at home about sex. In closing, I'd like to share a quote that I absolutely love, and I have finally started reading my book about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He said, "Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak, and not to act is to act. And this is why I do what I do." Thank you.